Hi, my name is Rachel, and I do community engagement for relink.org. And we're just going to wait a few minutes and let people start logging on. And then I'm going to go through a few general slides about Relink, and then I'm going to pass it on to our co-host, Christy, who's going to share a little bit about the work that she does. And then she's going to be our host and introduce the speakers and watch the chat and the Q&A. So let's just give it a few minutes and I'll let people start logging on. Great, we're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you so much for joining us today. This is our third webinar in a three-part series, and it's going to be on John Schools, what we have learned about their success preventing recidivism. And Courtney and Stewart are joining us today, and Christy is going to tell you a little bit more about them when she introduces them, but we're so thankful that they're able to present today. So at relink.org, this is actually the front of our table cards. So we have table cards that we pass out. We would love to have your organization get some if you'd like. You can write into us at info@relink.org. But this is the front. The next slide I'll show you is the back. But this is information on relink.org. We are a free database in the state of Ohio. We have over 14,000 resources listed in it for anyone who has any type of need, from shelter to employment to different rehabilitation services. And one section that we do have in relink.org is for human trafficking resources. So we have a whole section of different providers and organizations who help human trafficking victims and help in prevention. So we would love for you to check out that section as well as all the other ones that we have in relink.org. So this is the front of our table card. It's a 4x6 card. And then this is the back. So it kind of shows a user how they can use it. It's free for anyone to use, relink.org. So you can just enter a location, you can put a zip code, you can put a city, you can do it by county, and then you can put in a radius of how many miles within that, whatever you have entered, that you would like to look for resources in. You choose one of those category of care boxes, and then you'll have several different options to choose from. We always say that you can do 3 clicks in 30 seconds to find a resource, so we try to make it as easy as possible to click through and find resources for those that you serve or for anyone that is in need. If you are a provider, we want to make sure that your services are listed on relink.org. It's really easy to be able to list your services on there. You just go to the account portal and click register. And once you do that, you'll have an account that will be set up. We'll create a link for it so that it's linked to your page. You can easily update your information. That's one thing that we're really pushing this year, is for people to please stay on top of your information. Make sure that your contact info, email, phone number, anything for anyone in need is updated and current on your page. So when people go on there and click, they have all of the up-to-date information and they get somebody, and it's not just a dead-end resource that we have listed. We want to make sure that everyone is able to connect with whoever they are trying to get resources from, or that provider. Our next webinar is going to be different than what we normally do. So every month we normally do an hour webinar, but we are working with the Cleveland Food Bank, and they were able to establish a new resource center that just opened in November this month. And we're doing next month where you can join us for the webinar at 2 o'clock, or if you are in the Northeastern Ohio area and you would like to take a tour prior to the webinar, you can go to the Resource Center from 12:30 to 1:30. They're going to be giving tours, but they had this amazing idea to take several different nonprofits and agencies and put them into one resource center, kind of like a one-stop shop where people can come and they can get a lot of their needs met in one place. So they're going to be sharing with us how they went from just being a food bank to expanding into this resource center, how the idea came about, how they were able to execute it. If anyone else has an idea like this that they would like to do, how they were able to accomplish it. And you can also take that live tour as well. So this is the information for Relink. If you'd like to call us, if you'd like to email us on our social media, you can connect with us that way. And we'd love to send you our newsletter. So if you go on to info@relink.org and email us there, we'd be happy to send you information, and we can put you on our newsletter mailing so that you can get all of our information of what's happening at Relink, things that are happening in the community, as well as our webinars that are coming up. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to turn it over to Christy Bartman from Eyes Up Appalachia. She is an amazing partner with us here at Relink. She is an expert at what she does, and we love working with her and just her heart to help those who are being trafficked. And she's going to explain a little bit about what she does, and then she's going to be our host for today.
Thank you, Rachel, and right back at you as far as the partnership goes. It's just been truly amazing, and I really do appreciate it. But I'm Christy Bartman. I have Eyes Up Appalachia, which is an anti-human trafficking initiative. I focus on the Appalachian counties in Ohio, but I work with a lot of different agencies around the state, and one of the ones that I get to work with is She Has a Name. And so I'm really excited today to help bring you this different look at some of the things. I mean, I know a lot of you have been on the series of webinars that we've done, and I really appreciate it. This time, we're going to look at it a little differently. We're going to look at the demand side of sex trafficking, and we're going to look at how preventing recidivism, one way to prevent recidivism through the solicitor education programs, generally known as John Schools. And so I will introduce quickly Courtney. Courtney is the executive director and is responsible for implementing the mission and vision of She Has a Name. Her favorite part of her job is training individuals and organizations in understanding the cause and discovering how they can join the movement in unique and meaningful ways. She's led conversations with JP Morgan Chase's Habit team, the sustainability department at Abercrombie & Fitch, and countless other professional spaces around Ohio. Also with her today is Stewart Kitchen. He's the program development and graduate research fellow for She Has a Name. In 2019, he was a presenter. He started as a presenter with SHAN's Solicitor education program, which is an interventional education program for first-time offenders who have been charged with buying sex in Columbus, Ohio. He's now the program coordinator of the program, and his responsibilities include the evaluation of course curricula, administering a program that not only helps men understand the correlation between buying sex and trauma of compulsory sex work, but also to help them recognize and address the life experiences that have influenced their current views of sex, relationships, and power. And so I'm really looking forward to turning this over to them and learning a great deal today. So thank you, guys. Thank you, Courtney and Stu, for jumping on, and I will turn it over to you.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having us, Relink. I've also tuned into some of those prior webinars, and it's just great to see the holistic view that we get to have in understanding what human trafficking is. So let me pull up our slides here for you all. And we'll get started. So Kirsty's done a great job of introducing us, but as we get started today, I want you to know that She Has a Name's been around since 2010, and we've been a part of the John School since 2012. We came to own the current Franklin County School in 2021. So we've been a part of this John School space and the solicitor education space for a number of years. But today's conversation, I'd like to start with kind of reframing the human trafficking conversation. So as you all know, there is a lot of resources and education that's developed around caring for victims and survivors of human trafficking. Of course, a lot more needs to be done, and we're responding and caring for survivors as well at She Has a Name. But for today's time, I really want to think about the economic structure behind human trafficking, because it is a business. It generates billions of dollars every year. And because it is a business, it operates on that model of supply and demand. So as we mentioned briefly, we think a lot about the supply side, the victims and survivors, but today we're going to focus on the demand side. And while there are a few women and non-cisgender individuals who do purchase sex, the vast majority that come through our program are men. So that's who we're going to be talking about a lot today. And we know She Is a Name that in caring for all those impacted by human trafficking, we're never going to stop human trafficking if we're only caring for victims and survivors after they've exited the life. We also need to care about prevention before it ever starts. And we also need to look at resources for men who are currently buying and creating that demand for sex. What we've learned from our school, what we're unpacking today, is that a lot of the demand comes from people who struggle with multiple and complex issues, whether that's their own history of trauma or just a few other things that we're going to talk about today. So that's just the frame of mind that we'd like you to show here for as we go into this discussion. Of course, in Ohio, solicitation is illegal. So what we're sharing is not excuses by any means, but rather just a framework so that we can understand more about what led people to buy sex so that we can offer them resources to hopefully stop and greatly reduce recidivism along the way. So Stu, go ahead and pick it up with talking a little bit more about the demand.
Yeah, no problem. So we're going to look at why men are buying sex. We have years and years of research and survey data today on why men have chose to engage in this behavior. And from my previous experience working in a corrections setting with mostly men who have committed a variety of crimes in the past, I will say, other than a few very rare instances, I've not yet met a person who just woke up one morning and said, I think I'm going to make a bad decision today or be a menace to society today. There's a history behind everybody's belief systems and their actions. And what we have seen over the last several years is that it could be a drip feeding of a belief system that's happened throughout an individual's life that leads to their belief around sex, power, and relationship. Or it could be, a few traumatic events that have led to the way they look at sex and the way they look at power that leads to this crime. We're going to look a little bit at the old model, at what we're doing today based on this research that we think brings better results for reducing recidivism. And yeah, let's get into it. Courtney, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. So who is fueling the demand for trafficking and what does the buyer actually look like? And the short answer is that could really be anybody. Studies of male consumers of commercial sex find that buyers are similar to the general population in most regards. And Columbus, I think we can say, is a pretty good cross-section of America. And I think some of the research that we have done really does match a lot of the research that's been done nationally. So a substantial portion of men in the U.S. admits to having purchased sex at some point in their lives. The most recent study shows that somewhere between 10 to 20% admit that they have purchased sex at some time throughout their lives. And purchasing sex does not just mean the physical act of buying sex. It could also mean purchasing porn online or engaging with a live person online to commit online sex acts as well. So the average age of men who are buying sex in the city of Columbus is 43 years old. And this is also a national average as well. They reviewed 407 cases of individuals and found to have purchased or attempted to purchase sex from a minor. Sorry, I lost connection there for a second, everybody. 19% of the buyer's professions involve working with children, such as a teacher, a sports coach, a military recruiter, or even Boy Scout leaders. 22% are involved in a position of authority or trust, such as an attorney, law enforcement, military, or minister. And these men represent all types of race and demographics, including those who are white, Black, Asian, and more, according to interviews of 700 men from 6 different countries. So through our surveys over the years, we've been able to categorize the reasons why men are giving for soliciting sex into 5 different categories. So why do people solicit? It's a pretty complex question. And it's a very complex answer. There's a lot of reasons why men are choosing to buy sex. And some people have asked, why do we need to know why they're doing it? We just need to punish them for doing it and prevent them from doing it in the future. Well, if we aren't asking the question, what is leading to men buying sex, we can't create preventative measures, create preventative education programs to prevent it from happening in the future. And in the last few years, there's been just a strong push to really understand why men are buying sex. As the human trafficking movement really became well known and more than just a buzzword. 15 years ago, the primary focus was working with survivors of human trafficking. And that's always going to be the focal point of anti-human trafficking work, is how we can help survivors and how we can prevent more victimization in the future. But in the last few years, we've started to see a stronger emphasis on, well, this is a business. There are men buying it. How can we reduce the demand side of things? So we're getting down to the nitty-gritty of men's motivation for buying sex. And some of the reasons that we have seen these categories are sex with intimacy, which is a way to approximate intimate relationships that they're unable or unwilling to develop outside of a transaction. Sex without intimacy, a way to get sex without the investment and compromises needed for an intimate relationship. Variety, which is fulfilling a desire for sex with women of various types or interests, based on ethnicity, size, age, hair color, whatever it may be. One of these is thrills, just the excitement of doing something that they know is illegal or that they shouldn't be doing, or that nobody knows about. That does contribute to this as well. And then there's pathology, being drawn to this by compulsion, addiction, different forms of sociopathy, or just misogynistic views of female or power. Next, please. So over the years, we have had over 1,000 individuals come through Columbus's John School and Solicitor Education program. And we have been collecting survey data since 2005. And since then, we've had over 700 individuals fill out our survey. We've been able to get a lot of really great data that's helped us put together our existing curriculum that we think is very impactful. And the goal of the programs is to decrease the demand for prostitution and hence reduce the amount of human trafficking and sexual exploitation that occurs. So if we can help these men understand, first of all, that there is a correlation between purchasing sex and victimization, that just two consenting adults making a transaction together. So that's one of the goals of our solicitor education program. And the other is really to get down to the root cause of why the men are doing it, help them understand and identify why they are engaging in this behavior. So 45, again, is the average age of the graduates of the solicitor education program in Columbus. 35 is the average age that they state that they first solicited. And there are 23 questions on the survey. And we're going to go through some of that survey data that I think is pretty interesting and gives us kind of an idea of a little bit of the psychology behind what's leading to men buying sex. So next slide, please. First, we have ethnicity, just a general breakdown. And what we find is that this breakdown of men who are attending the solicitor education program, it's a pretty good cross-section of the city of Columbus as well. The data is based on 658 responses, and Caucasian is 42%, African-American is 36%, Hispanic is 11%, Asian 8%, and other ethnicities is 3%. And next, looking at marital status, 45% claim that they are single, 38% claim that they're married, 12% divorced, 4% separated, and 1% other. So we'll see we're fairly split as far as being single and married, which is really interesting. And I think what's going to get really interesting are these next couple of slides that really break that down even more and give us a little bit more insight. So we then asked their relationship status. Are you currently in a committed relationship? And this is based off of 666 responses. 51% said no, 49% said yes. So a significant amount of men are claiming that they are in a committed relationship. Then we broke that down even more with our next slide. If yes, are you emotionally satisfied in that relationship? 78% said yes. And if yes, are you sexually satisfied in that relationship? 66% said yes. So these men are largely in relationships, largely saying that they're emotionally and sexually satisfied in those relationships, yet they're still choosing to engage in these behaviors. So that does tell us that there's something else going on. There's a little bit more psychologically going on with these men and why they're choosing to purchase sex. So are they really satisfied in the relationships, both emotionally and sexually? Are they convincing themselves that they are? And if so, then why are they choosing to do this? So we then asked them, which of the following factors influence your decision to solicit sex? We gave 9 specific responses and asked them to pick all the ones that seemed to contribute to their decision to purchase sex. So it is a way to have sex without the responsibilities of a relationship, 36%. It's an easy way to access sex, 22%. It's exciting and thrilling to approach a prostitute, 21%. My current relationship is not satisfying, 10%. I like to have a variety of partners, 10%. I feel that most women find me unattractive, 10%. To engage in sex acts that a traditional partner won't do, 10%. And I have difficulty meeting women, 10%. And finally, I prefer prostitution to a traditional relationship, 4%. So then we also asked them, in their own words, why they chose to do that. And we left this as an open-ended question and tried to just kind of get down to the nitty-gritty of why they felt they were choosing to do that without any prompting. And loneliness was 20%. Lack of sex or intimacy or companionship with a partner is 16%. Curiosity is 14%. Boredom, 13%. Something new or different, 10%. Fun, 8%. Depression, 8%. Excitement, 7%. And thrill, 5%. So as you can tell, the reasons men are soliciting sex are kind of complex and kind of varied and really go on a case-by-case basis. It's not just stereotypes like porn or sex addiction. For at least these men, there are deeper issues of intimacy, depression, or loneliness. This presentation is called Why Men Solicit Sex. And we look at this data in the last few slides as, why men solicit sex as if they're reasons, but really these are the justifications that they've given for engaging in the behavior. The reasons men are soliciting sex are much deeper. There's some psychological reasons that are leading to this belief system and these behaviors, making them think that A, it's okay, or that they might not realize the complete view of victimization that's going on here. And how we treat this really varies as well. For example, we had one man in his 70s in our solicitor education program who had just celebrated his 50th anniversary with his wife. And he said that he decided to solicit because he couldn't even remember the last time his wife had sex with him. And his wife couldn't even remember his name because she was in the advanced stages of dementia. And one day he chose to purchase sex, claimed it was his first time. So how do we treat that? How do we educate that? I mean, he's clearly not a sex addict, so he doesn't need sex addict therapy, but maybe he needs relational therapy, some sort of counseling to understand what he's going through with his wife. So it's really a case-by-case basis. And what the purpose of our solicitor education program is not to address one root cause, but to help men identify what the root causes are that might lead to them personally purchasing sex, and then provide them with the resources that they need to pursue that help after our program.
We can take any questions at this point about the data that we've shared before we get into a broader view of some demand reduction tactics. So you can use the Q&A feature to be able to ask us some questions if you have some. And I saw there was one about the slides, and we can make sure that Rachel at Relink gets those and sends those with the follow-up materials. And
I
I
did
see
see it.
one. Go ahead, Stu.
Yeah, I saw a question about the data that we were using. The data of why men are soliciting sex, all the pie charts that we've shown, those come directly from the surveys that we give out at our solicitor education program in Columbus. The previous data from earlier in the presentation that was national data, that came from nationwide research that's been done.
All right. So we wanted to share, just outside of solicitor education programs, what are a few demand reduction tactics that we see across the country. And as we share some of these, I want you to think about, is there anything from this group that surprises you, or maybe that you've never heard of before? Or are there strategies that you see missing from this list that you think, we all should pay more attention to? So let's see here. This is a complete list which we've taken from the Demand Reduction Forum. We're just going to touch on a couple of these today, but I just want you to understand kind of the breadth of demand reduction strategies that are out there. Everything from arrest tactics to what's happening after a person's been arrested, and finally some prevention and other tactics that are often adopted by community members, whether that's Dear John letters, public education, loss of employment, things like that. So we just have a few that we want to focus on today. So the first is reverse and web stings. And this is one of the most common tactics. It's used in over 2,000 cities across the United States, almost 3,000 cities in the US. So this looks a lot at the actual arrest tactic that law enforcement is using in order to understand or try to get people at the point of purchase. So the reverse sting, or a John sting, is one where there's a police decoy. It's usually a female officer that's posing as a person engaged in sex work. And so someone will go online, they'll respond to an ad. When they show up in person to purchase sex, that's when the point of arrest happens. And it's pretty resource heavy. That's one of the main cons to this method, is that it does take a lot of resources to have the officers who are specially trained to have the resources to be able to post and respond to ads. I know for here in Columbus, one of the things that they did, they posted 2 ads on a Tuesday night, and they had over 5,000 responses. And now there's balloons. I'm sorry, guys. The AI features are not helpful here on Zoom. Anyways, so on one of those stings, there were 2 ads, and from those 2 ads, they had over 5,000 responses on one Tuesday night. Obviously, our police force does not have the resources in order to respond to 5,000 people. They can't make 5,000 arrests. They might make 24. So there's a huge gap as well in between where we're seeing the demand and where we actually can respond within a reverse sting.
I'd like to add to that. That from those 5,000 hits on that, only 8 prosecutions were made. So with a population of 1.3 million in the city of Columbus, having 5,000 hit within a 12-hour period, it's pretty significant.
Yeah. Anything you'd like to add about web stings, Stu?
Yeah, absolutely. So web stings involve police posting online decoy ads. The method is used in 1,565 cities and counties in the US. Some of the operations target predators seeking to purchase sex from minors. It is used a lot more to identify those trying to purchase sex from minors and those trying to purchase sex from other adults. It's used much more in that environment in law enforcement than trying to target the men that typically come to solicitor education programs and John schools who are caught trying to buy sex from other adults. A variation of this approach of investigation placing decoy ads involves police responding to real online advertising, replacing pimps and prostituted persons with police decoy, and seizing their phones and continuing to take calls and messages from Johns responding to the original ads. And an alternative to web-based reverse stings involves women police decoys, female police officers responding to online ads placed by Johns, but it's not used very often. All right, next we have John schools and solicitor education programs. We call our John school the solicitor education program. We feel it's a better description of
Hey, Stu,
what we
can I
do.
jump in real quickly?
Yeah, absolutely.
Before you get onto that one, we have a question. It says, do undercover agents in some way violate victims' civil rights or entrapment?
When you say victims' civil rights, do you,
I'm assuming they mean the solicitor.
the solicitor. So I get asked that question every single class by a man who believes that he's been, trapped into being there or something like that. Whatever anybody's personal beliefs are on it, Ohio Revised Code does clearly state that the police have the right to lie, be disingenuous in putting those ads out to make them think that they are, a woman trying to sell sex or a child trying to sell sex. So there's not really much legal grounding as far as that goes for fighting it, for entrapment or anything like that.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, so John schools. They're mostly for men who have been arrested for buying sex. The schools can be structured as a sentencing option and combined with other criminal sanctions, or as a diversion program resulting in dismissed charges. John schools can be one-day classes or designed as multiple session counseling programs. Ours is a one-day session. There are a few other programs around the country that do 8-week sessions. We like that we keep ours to one day, and the reason why is it allows us to help those men identify what those issues are that they personally struggle with that led to them choosing to purchase sex. And then we can encourage them to find resources on their own that's more catered to what they are struggling with. The programs are financed by the fees or fines that the arrested Johns must pay for soliciting sex. The fees or fines usually cover all the program costs and often produce excess revenue used to fund survivor recovery programs. So as she has a name, it is a fundraiser for us, and we do fund a lot of our survivor programs with that as well. And John schools are currently located in over 70 places in the US and serve at least 230 cities and counties. And widely available versions of John schools can be accessed as online courses or even as DVD presentations. The Chicago Alliance Against Sexual Exploitation conducted a study in 2008 of 113 men who bought sex and found that men could be deterred from buying sex if they face real consequences, such as fines of $1,000 or more, public accountability for what they had done. Next slide, please.
Sorry for that. My sick daughter woke up from her nap, so she is in front of the iPad for the next 30 minutes. All right, let me talk about public education for a little bit. This is something that She Has a Name is doing to respond. We hope that this is a prevention strategy. So outside of the criminal justice system, before you've ever made the decision to purchase sex, we hope that you've heard at least a little bit about human trafficking and the correlation that exists between sex work and prostitution and human trafficking, how complex it is to understand the differences between those. So we do offer education that involves human trafficking, that takes a look at some of the factors like this we share with our audience, but we hope that we can reach more young men with this so that, again, they can hopefully never purchase sex or understand at least a little bit more about that transaction before they ever make the decision I want to highlight too here that we've developed specifically a demand reduction curriculum. We're in the final stages of creating both a youth track as well as an adult track, and this is developed by our demand reduction team, which is mostly men, and it's meant to be shared in male-centric spaces, whether that's church groups, whether that's in clubs like Kiwanis or Rotary, whether that's in youth settings. But we hope that that's a way to have more of a conversational space to unpack the reasons why we purchase sex or the reasons why we view pornography, so that hopefully, again, it stops before it ever starts or ever gets to the point of that transaction.
So we're going to talk a little bit about our strategy for reducing recidivism and purchasing sex in the city of Columbus, kind of the modalities that we use in our solicitor education program and what our hopes are there. Next slide, please. So all of these demand reduction tactics have pros and cons, but we believe the best strategy is one that seeks to address the root issues of why these men are soliciting sex. So our goal is to reduce the demand for sex trafficking by transforming solicitors, strugglers, and sideliners into champions of freedom from sexual slavery. Part of the solicitor education program curricula helps them understand that correlation between purchasing sex and the victimization involved in it. And we always have a female survivor that comes and speaks to the men at the end of the day. And that always hits them really hard when they start seeing the people that they're buying sex from as somebody that could be their sister, their niece, their friend, whoever it may be. And it really gives them that personal touch than simply seen as just a very transactional thing. So that's why we're offering a solicitor education program, is to really help these men address their root causes, but also humanize the women who are victims of compulsory sex work or human trafficking as well.
Stu, can I throw something out here?
Absolutely.
So a couple of things. First, just wanted to, kind of highlight that the AG and the state of Ohio has a number of human trafficking task forces in the state, and they do tend to treat the survivors as victims versus arresting for prostitution unless there's an open warrant or something like that. So I just want to kind of make sure that's clear to the attendees. Another, a couple of questions on stats. One came in, how many arrests, do you know how many arrests monthly, or is that more a law enforcement stat? And then secondly, have you done any studies based on the recidivism on a difference between an online setting and an in-person setting?
Yeah, I'll answer the arrest one first. The arrests really vary depending on when the Columbus Division of Police chooses to do a sting operation, or whether they're a part of a statewide sting operation. Earlier this fall, Columbus partnered with the AG's office to conduct a sting operation. 64 men in the city of Columbus were arrested in one evening. And all of those men came to our last solicitor education program. Those happen once or twice a year. Throughout the rest of the year, it just kind of trickles in. Sometimes we'll have 20 men in our solicitor education program. Sometimes we'll have 30 to 40 men in our solicitor education program. It really has to do with police resources, also their priorities, with whatever may be going on seasonally, I guess, if that makes sense. So I would say there's no average number monthly. It really does vary. And then to answer the question about recidivism, and I'll get into this a little bit more later, but I'll go ahead and kind of answer that question now. As far as recidivism goes, there's not a lot of research on the recidivism of purchasing sex. There's been a few studies out there done, but I question how accurate those are. And the reason why is in most places, buying sex is a misdemeanor. And a misdemeanor can be expunged from your record with a pretty small fee to the court system. And once that's done, once that's expunged from the record, we have no access to those records. So it's really hard to know the recidivism rates of most misdemeanor crimes. So that's why we have designed our solicitor education program based on a model that's proven to reduce recidivism in a corrections setting. We really have very little data on how effective solicitor education programs in John schools really are. And it's really hard to get that information.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So we'll talk about some of the complaints of the traditional John School model. I would say that in terms of interventional education programs, John schools are kind of the Wild West out there. Every municipality has the freedom to kind of create their own curriculum. Some take what I guess I would call a hardcore shaming approach to what they do, where the men come in and they let them know what they did, how it impacts the community. And there are some jurisdictions out there that even put these men's faces on billboards and does that kind of public shaming. I would say that Columbus is very much on the other end of the spectrum, where we take a much more therapeutic approach, try to really get down to the root causes of why men are choosing to do this. So let's talk about some of the complaints of the traditional John School model. One is stigmatization. Advocates for sex workers say that John School programs, which are aimed to reduce the recidivism rate among men arrested for soliciting compulsory sex workers, should close because they stigmatize all workers and unfairly target low-income men. On the West Coast, particularly in the Pacific Northwest, there's been a call to close several John schools there because they feel that they are stigmatizing sex work in a culture where sex work is becoming more and more accepted in our culture. Another reason is that they're ineffective. There's no academic study to date that has documented a causal connection between John School programs and a decline in recidivism, as I mentioned before. So rates among male purchasers of commercial sex, we don't know what those rates are. We don't know how many of them are choosing not to purchase after they've already been arrested once and gone through a solicitor education program. So that is another complaint of the traditional John School. They don't know how effective that they are. And another complaint is that some people believe that they're just a slap on the wrist. Some people believe that these men should be put on billboards. They should be put on a registry like the sex offender registry. And although there's so much research that shows that the sex offender registry doesn't even really reduce crime, there are a lot of people that just take a very hard punitive approach to crimes like this. So we'll talk about what our goals are. So our goals are to identify the thoughts, belief systems, and experiences that lead to the behavior. So by creating a therapeutic and engaging environment that encourages more vulnerability, men are guided through discussions that address their belief systems related to sex, power, and relationships. And our program has mostly male facilitators that come in throughout the day, share their experiences, the struggles that they have had with porn, sex addiction, whatever it may be, and really openly share their stories and create this environment of vulnerability that makes men feel much more comfortable opening up and sharing about their struggles as well. We also try to help them develop an understanding of the connection between purchasing sex and compulsory sex work. So participants gain an empathetic perspective on what compulsory sex workers experience, as well as a stronger understanding of how their decision to purchase sex causes harm to their community and even their families or other individuals that they're in relationships with. So we have, as I mentioned before, a former sex worker who was trafficked in the city of Columbus come in and share her experience, what her life was like before, during, and after. And then we also have a therapist come in and talk about how their behaviors impact their relationships with their family and the community as well, and try to shed some light on how their behavior isn't a victimless crime. They're victims of this, whether it's the community and the impact that they're having on the community or the impact they're having on their loved ones as well. And then finally, it's to reduce recidivism and reoffending. So we chose to utilize the criminogenic needs domain model of criminal justice programming. And we've designed the SCP around that because the criminogenic needs domain model has been proven to reduce recidivism in programs in programs using that model in the corrections department. So the criminogenic needs domains are low self-control, antisocial personality, antisocial values, criminal peers, substance abuse, and dysfunctional family. And what they find in the correction settings is that programs that are created to address all 6 of those areas are significant in reducing recidivism, depending on what the area of crime may be. In some crimes, it's up to 60%, I believe, reduction in recidivism, which is significant. So because we can't know how effective our programs are as far as recidivism goes, we thought it would just be best to design a program based on a modality that is proven to reduce recidivism. Next slide, please. So one of the questions that we ask the men at the end of our solicitor education program is, would you change your mind about soliciting sex if you knew that the majority of victims were victims of violence? And 81% say yes. And these men take the survey at the end of the day. And, you know, the question I always get when I share this is, how honest do you think these men are being? Well, you know, I don't know how honest these men are being, but I do know that, you know, since we've been giving this survey since 2005, and we have, you know, almost 1,000 responses to this question, I would say that there's a lot of validity there, that a lot of these men at least do have a sense at the end of the day that these women are victims and they are contributing to a more significant problem in our community. So another question we asked, next slide, please. Begin at a young age. We have a few different female survivors of human trafficking who come in kind of on a rotation and talk at our John School. And there are a few of them that were first trafficked into sex by their own mothers at the age of 9, 10 years old, so their own mothers could feed their own addiction habits. And I think when men start hearing stories like that, it really, really opens their eyes. And I think when we think about human trafficking, the first thought that comes to a lot of people's mind are movies like Taken or The Sound of Freedom, where it's the kidnapping, the knocking down the doors, and then the action movie. You know, unfortunately, that's not what trafficking really looks like in Central Ohio. A majority of human trafficking looks like what I just described: somebody within your family that is selling you into sex, typically at a young age. And that's another thing that these men walk away understanding as well, and another thing that really humanizes the entire experience of purchasing sex for them. So this is a quote that came from a man who went through the John School. And I want to leave you all with a story from this, that I really do believe that change is possible. This is a young man named Ryan who attended our program, who said he struggled with depression and loneliness for years. And he decided to solicit and got arrested by an undercover officer. Since his arrest, Ryan has graduated from our program, became an official volunteer at She Has a Name, and even started teaching the solicitor education program before he relocated to Colorado. So he shared a letter with us before he moved away to Colorado, and it says, "Over the past few years, I've been battling loneliness and depression. These struggles led me to make the worst decision of my life. A few months ago, I found myself at rock bottom and made the decision to solicit. Thankfully, I was arrested and stopped short of making a horrible mistake. Since this was my first offense, and that will be my last, I was allowed to participate in the John School. I knew going to the program that I wanted to get involved in the fight against human trafficking, but after participating in the program, I knew I had to. The program opened my eyes to the world of human trafficking, and in my heart, I knew I wanted to help in any way possible. Through my experience, I found a relationship with God and gained a better understanding of the awful world of human trafficking that prior to this experience, I knew nothing about. I wish more than anything I could take back my mistake, but in a strange way, it's made me a better person. I know now I can move forward and raise awareness with dreams of ending this horrible issue." And I would like to say that Ryan's story is not, I've been helping teach the solicitor education program since 2019, and at every single one of them, and we do for a year, at every single one of them, there are men who walk up to me afterwards and share something, you know, with a sentiment similar to this. Would I say that all the men walk away feeling this way, or even a majority do? I don't know. I can't say that. but I would say that there are always a few men, a small handful, that walk up to me after every single class and share something like this with me, that it really opened their eyes. It changed the way that they look at buying sex and at human trafficking. And that's what our goal is, right? Our goal is not to shame these men. Our goal is not to punish these men. Our goal is to help these men become better and learn something new. Maybe share that with somebody else when they leave the program and go out there into the world. Maybe share what they learned with their son, and maybe their son will grow up with a better understanding of relationships and sex and human trafficking and whatever it may be. And that's what we really want to accomplish with our solicitor education program. I know the title of the presentation was What We Know About Recidivism. And I wish I could tell you those numbers and exactly what it is, because we don't know. But what I can tell you is that even if I have 2 or 3 men that come up to me at the end of every one of these classes who claim that they have opened their eyes to this issue and they've changed a little bit from the experience, I think we're doing something right.
Thank you so much. We really do appreciate it. This has been eye-opening. It really is a good perspective for us to understand, something to look at as we're looking through the whole picture. We have a couple of other questions that I wanted to throw out that came in. The first one is this activity increases in cities where they're hosting major events like the Arnold. How are out-of-town arrested Johns handled? Can you speak to that at all? Are you part of that solution? What happens to these folks that are in here from out of town that are arrested on solicitation?
Yeah, so actually at our last John School, we had a man who lives in New York who was arrested in the city of Columbus and had to attend a John School. He had to come back to Columbus for the weekend and attended our solicitor education program and then went back to New York. So they're not handled any differently than the men who are residing in Columbus.
Okay, thank you. Also, is the John School that you offer right now is only open to first-time offenders? Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. One other question came in, and I'm going to take a little license and open it up a little bit more. The question was a question regarding seasonal addiction to porn, if that was real. But I think I'd like to open it up more so on, what do you see that we can do in a preventative way to make it so that individuals are not, this is not something that they consider. And is porn part of that kind of leads somebody to this decision to solicit?
Porn is a significant contributor to the decision to purchase sex. Absolutely. They used to always call marijuana the gateway drug, right? Porn is 100% a gateway to purchasing sex. We have a very in-depth discussion about the neuropsychology behind porn addiction at our solicitor education program, and that really engages some great conversation with the men. And I would say a vast majority, I don't have a specific number, so this is completely anecdotal, but a vast majority of the men who attend the solicitor education programs claim that they struggle with porn and have a porn problem, view porn multiple times a week. It's something that's becoming just so common in society that it's hard not to see that connection and see how it's affecting these men's decisions to participate in sex. And I think that porn gives a very unrealistic view of what sex is. And when men are growing up seeing those types of sex acts, they think that's what sex is. If their partner's not doing it with them, they'll go seek it out.
Thank you.
But I would like to answer that specific question. Seasonal porn addiction actually is a thing, just like seasonal depression is a thing. It's how people get that dopamine kick while they are depressed, while they are down. And yes, there is some research on that.
Thank you. Another question. Have you ever had a female participant come in? And if so, what was that experience like?
We have never had a cisgendered female participant. Courtney, can you verify that for me?
I believe that's true.
Okay.
Is there anybody else that wants to put up a question? We've got a couple more minutes, and then I know Rachel has a few housekeeping things to finish up. Are there any other questions? And just in case you haven't seen in the chat, Rachel will be sending out the link to the recording as well as materials. And you said that the slides were going to be available, Courtney? Okay, so she'll make the slides available to you as well. All right, I don't see any other questions. Thank you so much, Courtney and Stu. Really appreciated, really good information that we all needed to hear.
Thanks for having us.
I appreciate all of you taking your time today. This was great information. I know we already had some compliments in the chat. I was going to say that a survey will be coming out, and if you fill out that survey, then that's how I know who needs a CEU. So when you do that, you can fill it out. Either way, we love to have the feedback, even if you don't need a CEU. But if you do, you can mark that bubble on the survey letting us know so I can get that to you. Typically, I try to get them out by the beginning of the following week. So sometime by Monday or Tuesday of next week. We will send a follow-up email to everyone, like Christy said, and it'll have all that information included. And feel free to always respond back to us, to write into info@relink.org if there's something you'd like to see a more extensive training on, or a topic that you would really like to learn more about. We'd love to hear about that as we're going into the new year. I know Christy and our Relink team, we just had a planning meeting this week, and we talked about some of the things that we'd like to present on in the future. And we just want to make sure that we're really covering topics that are helpful and that give a little bit more in-depth perspective into something that you would want to learn more about. So thank you so much for this team. Thank you for working with us together to help those and to bring awareness to this topic. Have a good day.